So today I wanted to just chat to you about making changes. There are a few things that have been cropping up in my therapy room over the last, few months really. So I just thought I would explore them with you, maybe think out loud a little bit about change. So today's video is, why is it that we really struggle to make positive change and stick with it? We've all had the experience, haven't we, of trying to learn something new or create a new habit or change something we don't like about ourselves, and found it really, really tough. And it's quite easy, isn't it, to start feeling a little bit disgruntled and then lose your motivation to change. So first of all, I just wanted to reassure you that change is not linear. That we go forward and then we go backwards, and sometimes we go round in circles, and sometimes it feels like there's no direction at all. But do you know what? I think that's all okay, because it is part of the journey, and every part of the journey is a different experience, and it will give you an opportunity to learn something towards getting there in the end. So I just wanted to throw that out there first of all, that you're not doing anything wrong and that you're not unsuccessful. So change. Why is change so difficult? Well, partly I think it's because of our primitive brain. So if you were to chop a human brain down the middle, you would see the original primitive brain at the core. And that primitive brain is all about survival. So you could say it's done a really good job, because here we are as a human species millions of years later, and we're still surviving. The primitive brain is very black and white. It doesn't do grey. So it's either good or bad, and there's no in between. And it's either good for survival or bad for survival. Now, as we grow up, we have more and more experiences, and they're saved in our brain. If they're important, if they're of value, they'll be saved. So there'll be those things that make us feel good, saved in one particular storage shed in the brain, and then there'll be those things which have been construed as a threat to our survival. So for example, when I was really small, about 6, I think I trod on a bee. I was in a campsite in France and I trod on a bee and it stung me. And then I became quite afraid of bees after that, actually. And so, I didn't like the sound or the noise of them, and I used to run around hysterically waving my arms in the air. So my brain had stored bees as being scary. Now, it doesn't just store the thing that's scary, but also, our behaviours in response to it, and also our emotional responses as well. All of that's stored in the storage shed in the brain. And the reason why is because it could be useful. If we come across that situation or something similar, then we've already got what we need to do to hand in the brain. So let me give you an example. You have a rotten day at work, you get told off by your boss, you go home feeling miserable, you eat a slice of cake, you feel better. So the brain will save all of that in that storage shed in your brain, marked threat, as this is what we do. So your brain will quickly learn that eating a piece of cake is a good thing to do under threat. And of course, the more you get stressed, the more you eat the cake, the more that cements that response in the mind. And so it becomes almost habitual. So when I say habitual, what that means is there will be a neural pathway in the brain where we don't have to think consciously what to do. We already know what to do it. So take, for example, learning how to drive a car. First of all, you have to learn what the brakes are, what the accelerator is, how to use the steering wheel, how to use the gears, how to look in the mirror. And it's really, really overwhelming at first, because there are so many things to think about, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, doesn't it? And most of us who have learned how to drive will remember stalling, or going the wrong way, or sticking your foot on the wrong pedal, or not looking in the mirror. That was the thing I always used to get told off about. And the whole thing is really quite difficult. But eventually, the more you do it, the more your brain remembers what to do, and then you get to the stage where you can drive along and you're not even thinking about it anymore. So it's become a habit. Now, habits are when you have a neural pathway in the brain that your brain has wired from your experiences of learning how to drive the car until you can do it automatically. Now, going back to primitive man knew what to do in most situations. They didn't really have, the same amount of different experiences that we have, because in many ways their life was much more limited. So they kind of knew what to do and how to navigate their world. And any primitive man that took a risk was more likely to end up dead, frankly. If you saw a bear and you went over to that bear to investigate the bear, the chances are you end up at that bear's dinner, so you're dead. So the brain doesn't like you to do something different. It doesn't like you to take risks. It doesn't like you to change your behaviour. It doesn't like you to follow something that's not already got a neural pathway in the brain. A, because it's easier, but B, because it hasn't been sussed out yet. Is this safe? Is it not safe? So it doesn't want you to take risks just in case something bad happens to you. So 70% of what we do in our everyday lives is actually already habit. So when we come to do something new, A, it's going to feel hard because we won't have that neural pathway wired up from the experience of it, because we haven't had that experience of it. And secondly, the primitive brain doesn't want us to do something different to what we ordinarily do, because then it feels like it's losing control. So the primitive brain steps in and tries to pull you back to your old behaviour. So resistance, that's what resistance is. I'll give you an example. I don't know. Say you want to change your eating habits and you want to eat less chocolate or less crisps. So you want to replace that with a nice healthy salad. So you tuck into your nice healthy salad, and then half an hour later your primitive brain's going, yeah, but what about the chocolate bar? You did hide the chocolate bar. It's in the cupboard, and you put it at the back so you could just take a chair in and go and get that chocolate bar. And before you know it, that's exactly what you're doing. Your brain just wants you to do what it's always done in order to keep you safe. It doesn't want you taking any risks. So you are going to get resistance, and that is normal. But if you know why, then it's easier to deal with. So the other thing that can happen when we make change, we can get really excited. Great, I'm going to learn how to speak Japanese. I'm going to do a conference call to a load of Japanese clients, so I need to learn how to speak Japanese, and you might be really excited about it. And often we have a little bit of naivety when we start to do something new, create a new habit, because it isn't quite as we imagined. We tend to have this sort of, idealised version of what it's going to be like, and then we try and do it, and it's a lot more difficult than we anticipated. So then there's another time when we can become quite despondent, and we lose our motivation and we give up. So what do we need to really do to help ourselves in order to achieve change? A couple of things, really. Now, most of us, when we want to do something, will be very clear about the end goal. We can see that with bells and whistles in high definition with surround sound. We know what the end goal looks like. But a lot of the time, what we don't do is work from where we are at any given time. So, say you want to change your eating habits and you know what your end goal is. So on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is your end goal. But at the moment, you're kind of hovering around a 2. What you don't want to do is to expect yourself to achieve a 10. You've got to break your end goal into a series of smaller bite-sized chunks, and you need to work from where you are at that moment. So if you're a 2, you need to be thinking about a 3. Now that's within your reach. That's just slightly outside of your comfort zone and can be achieved. Therefore, your brain won't try and resist it anywhere near as much as if you're trying to grasp towards a 10, which is so far away from where you are at any given moment that the brain will just go, yeah, right, you're having a laugh, I'm not doing that. So break your goal into much smaller chunks. Then when you achieve each little goal in itself, each little mini goal, it's really important just celebrate the success of the achievement. Because if you don't recognise what you've achieved, then you're never going to feel motivated to do any more. So you really do have to make a point of celebrating your little successes. Because what I tend to find with clients that do that is the more once they've achieved that first goal and they celebrate it, then the next achievements come a lot more quickly. If you don't recognise it's an achievement, then it doesn't have any value in your brain, and then you don't have the motivation then to do anything more with it. Practice. If you want to create a nice strong neural pathway in the brain, you've got to practice it over and over again. So you've got to be really determined. Some days are going to be easier than others, but that's okay. Just practice it as often as you can. And the more you practice it, the more you embed it into your brain, until after 45 days, I think it takes to create a new neural pathway in the brain. But remember, that's only a straggly little new pathway. If you want it to be a super duper highway in the brain, you have got to practice it over and over and over again. So be prepared to just do that, to do the work, to keep repeating it. Anticipate when you're likely to make mistakes. What I mean by that is, so say, let's go back to the eating habits. You want to replace chocolate and crisps with a nice healthy salad. But you are much more likely to, say, pick on unhealthy food in the evening. If you know you're much more likely to pick unhealthy food in the evening, then arrange to do something to distract yourself at that point. So know when your weak spots are, and know when they are, and try and mitigate for them. So if you can be aware of them, you can sort of safeguard against them. So be prepared for the repetition, celebrate every little tiny success, mitigate around those areas which are going to make it more difficult for you. Do not punish yourself when it goes wrong. Can't emphasize that enough. If you punish yourself, that's an opportunity for your inner critic to pop up and go, oh, see, you can't do anything right, you're useless. And then that only serves to make you feel even more negative than you did in the first place, and it will really sabotage you. So if it goes wrong, so what? What's the worst that can happen? Write it off, start again another day, but just don't punish yourself. Look at it and think, okay, it went wrong. Why did it go wrong? Okay, so that's what I need to do differently. But I think one of the most important things to also consider is this idea of speed. Speed will vary from day to day, as will your goals. So the great thing about goals is they are a wonderful way of marking off your progress, but not if you then use them as something to beat yourself with. So what I mean by that is some days you are going to feel really resilient, you're going to achieve your goals, you're going to do them easily, you're going to celebrate your success, and then you might think that the next day you're going to be able to do exactly the same thing. But say on that second day you wake up feeling anxious, then it's going to be much harder to achieve what you did the day before. So accept that some days are going to be easier than others, and that you might need to chunk your goals down even more depending on your mood, which might affect your speed. What I would say is, if you want to create a new habit that's going to stick with you in the long term, then be prepared to go slow, because that's much more likely to help it to embed in the brain. You know, if you do anything fast, A, you don't learn anything along the way about how you got there, because you went too quick to notice. But B, it's not firm, it's not safe. So, you know, I might say to a client, okay, you need to do X, Y, and you know, think about what you want to do, and they come up with something and they feel loads better, and the next week, yeah, it's all sorted, I'm great. And then 2 weeks later they ring you up because they're not great anymore, because they've crashed back down to earth. Because you haven't got the foundation in place. It's the repetition, it's the speed. Do it slowly. as much as I would love to be able to say to people, oh, you know, come and see me and I'll fix this in X, Y, or Z amount of days, you know, I can't do that. But what I do know is if you want that change to last, the slower you go, the better for you. So speed. And don't beat yourself up if every day isn't quite the same. You know, some days will be easier than others. And I think one of the things to take from this, beyond everything else, is the need to be compassionate towards yourself, so that if someday you can't achieve any part of your goal at all, then so be it. That's actually okay, because you can go back to it. You can have a day off, you can take a day away, you can do something different, you can just spend some time soothing or doing whatever it is that you need to do. So I think self-compassion is the most important thing to bear in mind when you're trying to do anything to make change. So if this video has been helpful to you, please do give me a like or subscribe to my channel. See you soon.